Imagine this. You're carrying a weight so heavy it crushes your every joy. It's not regret, not shame. It's the raw, unrelenting feeling of guilt. What if I told you that humans are wired to tolerate almost anything? Pain, loss, even heartbreak. But the one thing we absolutely cannot stand is this toxic guilt. It doesn't just haunt you. It hijacks your brain, blocking your path to happiness and pushing you toward dangerous escapes. Stick around for the next 10 minutes and I'll reveal why guilt is your brain's ultimate enemy and how to break free. You won't want to miss this. It could change how you live today. Let's dive right in. The feeling of guilt isn't just an emotion, it's a psychological powerhouse that humans evolved to avoid at all costs. In guilt psychology, we see that this emotion stems from our deepest fears of wrongdoing, whether real or perceived. But here's the bombshell. What a person cannot tolerate is the feeling of guilt because it directly blocks your brain's pleasure center. Think about it. Your brain's reward system, fueled by dopamine and endorphins, is designed for joy, motivation, and survival. Yet, when guilt hits, it acts like a firewall, shutting down access to those feel-good chemicals. Studies in psychological guilt tolerance show that this blockage isn't temporary. It lingers, making everyday pleasures feel hollow. Instead of driving you to fix the problem, like apologizing or making amends, guilt tricks your mind into seeking quick fixes. Why? Because the effects of guilt create an unbearable void and your brain craves relief. Now let's unpack how this works. The feeling of guilt always blocks the center of pleasure, creating a cycle of self-sabotage. Your brain, desperate for dopamine and endorphins, doesn't push you toward healthy guilt resolution strategies. No, instead it steers you to surrogates. These are artificial boosters that mimic pleasure but never solve the root issue. Take sugar, for example. That late-night ice cream binge? It's not just cravings, it's guilt's dopamine impact at play, flooding your system with a temporary high to escape the emotional burden. Or alcohol. Millions turn to it as a guilt addiction surrogate, numbing the pain but amplifying guilt the next day. Even prescribed anti-depressants can become crutches if they're masking unresolved guilt rather than addressing it. And don't forget other escapes. Endless shopping, binge watching, or even risky behaviors like gambling. These aren't solutions. They're band-aids on a festering wound. The toxic guilt effects compound, leading to guilt and self-sabotage where you avoid real change. Ask yourself, how many times have you reached for a quick fix instead of facing the guilt head-on? This is why overcoming guilt is crucial. It's not about ignoring it, but transforming it. A parent feeling guilty over work-life balance, turning to wine. A friend post-breakup, eating junk food. Use slow motion for emotional depth. To make this real, let's look at everyday scenarios. Picture Sarah, a busy mom overwhelmed by the feeling of guilt for missing her kid's soccer game. Instead of talking it out, guilt blocks her pleasure center, and she drowns in chocolate. Hello, guilt and endorphin surrogate. But it only worsens her guilt the next day. Or consider Mike, who cheated in a relationship. The psychological guilt tolerance threshold is crossed. He can't stand the inner turmoil. So, he hits the bar for alcohol, chasing that dopamine rush. These stories highlight the guilt pleasure center blockade. It's universal. Guilt doesn't motivate resolution. It fuels avoidance. The effects of guilt extend to health, chronic stress, anxiety, even depression. Managing guilt emotions means recognizing these patterns. If you're nodding along, you're not alone. Millions struggle with guilt blocking happiness, but there's hope. Understanding is the first step to escaping guilt feelings. So how do we break this cycle? First, acknowledge the guilt emotional burden. Don't suppress it. Use guilt resolution strategies like self-forgiveness exercises. Journal what happened, why it hurts, and what you can learn. This unblocks the pleasure center naturally. Second, ditch the surrogates. Replace sugar or alcohol with real dopamine boosters. Exercise, hobbies, or connecting with loved ones. Therapy helps too. Cognitive behavioral techniques rewire guilt psychology. Remember, guilt and pleasure blockage isn't permanent. Facing it head on restores balance. Third, build resilience. Practice mindfulness to spot guilt early, before it leads to self-sabotage. By dealing with inner guilt proactively, you'll tolerate it better and reclaim your joy. These steps aren't overnight fixes, but they're proven to combat toxic guilt effects. Subscribe for more insights. In summary, what a person cannot tolerate is the feeling of guilt because it hijacks your brain, blocking pleasure and pushing surrogates like sugar, alcohol, or antidepressants. But you have the power to overcome guilt. Start today with awareness and action. If this resonated, like, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. What's one step you'll take to manage your guilt? Thanks for watching. See you next time for more on guilt and self-sabotage.